What if the difference between a drive that limps out to 210 yards and one that carries 275 straight down the fairway has nothing to do with how hard you swing? I've spent years watching weekend golfers muscle up on the tee, red-faced, top button undone, trying to kill the ball, and most of them are fighting their own setup before they ever start the club back. There are 5 steps, and every one of them takes seconds to fix. None of them require a new driver, a swing overhaul, or a trip to a fitter. Strokes gained research out of Columbia University, done by Mark Brody, using over 26,000 amateur rounds, found that driving performance, distance, and accuracy combined predicts scoring better than any other part of the amateur game. Bigger than putting, bigger than iron play, bigger than short game. Get the ball in play off the tee at a reasonable distance, and your odds of making par or better on that hole roughly double compared to when you're hacking out of the rough. Stick around for step 4 because it's the one nobody on Golf YouTube explains correctly, the one about where your head needs to be at impact, and there's a number from long drive competition data later on that will change how you think about every drive you hit for the rest of your life. Let's get into it. Here's the one almost nobody checks before they hit a single ball. Tee height. It costs nothing, takes about 5 seconds to set, and it's wrong on the vast majority of amateur tee shots I see at any public course from Myrtle Beach to Scottsdale. The correct height for a modern 460 cubic centimeter driver head, which is the standard size on every driver sold today, is the ball sitting so that half of it, roughly the top hemisphere, sits above the crown of the driver at address. Not a third above, not 2/3, half. Set the club head behind the ball before you tee it and look at where the top edge of the face lines up. That line should cut the ball across its middle. TrackMan data collected during a Titleist amateur test day, tracking over 200 golfers, showed that moving tee height from ball flush with the crown up to a ball sitting fully above the crown shifted launch angle by an average of 3.7 degrees and attack angle by 2.4 degrees. At a 90-mile-per-hour swing speed, that swing in numbers alone changed carry distance by 12 to 18 yards, and that's with the exact same swing and the exact same driver. Think about that the way you'd think about a pitcher changing arm slot by 2 inches, small adjustment, completely different result downstream. Here's the mechanism, because this isn't superstition, it's physics. When you tee the ball too low, your body instinctively bends forward to reach it. Your spine tilts toward the targeted address, and that steepens your angle of attack. You end up hitting down and slightly across the ball with a 45-inch driver shaft, the same way you'd strike a 7-iron, and a driver was never built for a descending blow. That produces a shot with too much backspin and not enough launch, and it dies in the air. I've clocked amateurs losing 30 to 40 yards of carry from this single error alone, and they blame their swing speed every time. Tee it too high, 3/4 of the ball or more above the crown, and the opposite problem shows up. Your spine leans back too far trying to get under it, your path gets too shallow, and you catch the ball high on the club face. That's the strike that produces the sky ball, the one that pops straight up 60 feet and travels 90 yards, the most embarrassing shot in golf, or the low weak shot that peels left because you caught it on the heel. A concrete example. I worked with a 15 handicap player at a municipal course outside Tulsa 2 summers ago who was convinced his driver was the problem. He'd bought a new head that spring. His tee height was flush with the crown, teeing it like an iron shot off the deck. We raised his tee 3/4 of an inch, got the ball sitting half above the crown, changed nothing else about his swing, and his carry jumped from around 195 to 224 yards on the launch monitor that same session. That's roughly the distance from home plate to the center field wall at most high school ballparks, gained from a 2-second adjustment before the swing even starts. The common mistake is using the same tee height for every course and every wind condition without thinking about it, or worse, eyeballing it off the ground rather than off the club head. Ground height means nothing because grass length varies and it doesn't account for where your particular driver's crown sits relative to the face. Always set the club down first, then tee to the club, not to your eye level standing up. Get this one variable dialed in, and you've already fixed the single most overlooked launch condition in the entire driver swing. But tee height alone won't save you if what you're gripping the club with is fighting you the entire way down, and that's exactly where most amateurs go wrong next. Grip pressure gets talked about constantly, and explained correctly almost never. Every golf instructor says grip it light, and every amateur nods and then goes right back to strangling the club the moment they stand over a tee shot. Because the tee shot is the one swing where the ego shows up and tells you to hit it harder. Here's the actual number. Instructors and biomechanists, including work published through the Titleist Performance Institute, commonly describe grip pressure on a scale of 1 to 10, where 10 is a death grip and 1 is barely holding on. The number you want for a driver swing sits between 3 and 4. Most amateurs I watch are gripping at a 7 or 8 without realizing it, especially in the trail hand. Why does this matter so much for a driver specifically, more than for a wedge or a mid-iron? Because grip tension travels, it doesn't stay in your hands. Tight hands lock the small muscles of the forearm, which restricts the natural rotation of the forearms through impact, called supination and pronation in biomechanics terms. And that rotation is what squares the club face and creates lag, the stored angle between your lead arm and the shaft that releases a speed right before impact. A study on swing kinematics conducted at the Titleist Performance Institute measured forearm rotation speed under different grip pressures and found that golfers gripping in the 7 to 9 range on that pressure scale lost measurable club head speed compared to the same golfers swinging at a 3 to 4 pressure, because the tension in the forearms acted like a brake on that natural release. Some of their internal testing on amateur groups showed swing speed differences of 3 to 5 miles per hour, purely from grip tension, which translates to roughly 8 to 12 yards of total distance with a driver, similar to the difference between hitting a shot at sea level in Florida versus at altitude in Denver. There's a second problem tight grip pressure causes that almost nobody connects to grip at all, which is face control. A death grip tends to activate the muscles in a way that leaves the club face open at impact, because you can't release the club freely when your forearms are locked up. That's the exact mechanism behind the amateur slice that starts at the toes of everyone standing on the tee box and finishes in the trees right of the fairway. I saw this firsthand with a player at a resort course in Hilton Head, a low single-digit handicap in every other club except driver, where his grip pressure would visibly spike the second he pulled driver out of the bag. We worked on keeping his lead hand pressure at what I asked him to imagine as holding a tube of toothpaste with the cap off, firm enough not to drop it, loose enough not to squeeze anything out. His dispersion off the tee tightened from a 40-yard left-to-right spray down to about 18 yards within one range session. The fix is simple and physical, not mental, because telling yourself to relax under pressure rarely works on the course. Before you take your grip, waggle the club twice with just your fingers, not your palms, and let the club head feel heavy. That waggle is what tour players are doing. When you see them shuffle the club before address, it's not a nervous habit, it's a pressure reset. The common mistake is gripping correctly on the range and then squeezing harder the second there's a hazard or an audience, which tells you tension is often more mental than physical. And that's exactly the kind of pressure problem that carries straight into the next part of your swing, your weight, and most amateurs move it in the wrong direction entirely. Quick pause. Everything we just broke down about escaping that same frustrating round comes straight from the golfer's Bible. 101 course-tested fixes to stop playing the same bad round every weekend. This edition packs all 101 fixes into one tight, practical guide you can flip through before you even reach the first tee. Right now you can also grab the second book, the Score Drop Roadmap, completely free. Golf doesn't wait for perfect timing, and neither should your next round. Link in the description, QR code on screen. Stop repeating bad golf. Start playing the round you practiced for. This is the biggest one, and it's the step that fixes more bad drives than anything else on this list. Weight shift, or what modern biomechanics calls ground reaction force and pressure shift, is where most amateur golfers move in the exact opposite direction of what produces power. Watch any weekend golfer in slow motion and you'll see it. They shift their weight onto their back foot going back, which is correct, but then they hang there, staying on the trail side through impact, trying to help the ball into the air by scooping it with the upper body. That's called hanging back, and it's probably the single most common power leak in amateur golf. Here's what should happen instead, and here's the number behind it. Force plate research done by Sasho McKenzie, a biomechanics professor who has studied golf swing mechanics extensively and published work used by instructors across the PGA of America teaching system, shows that elite drivers of the golf ball shift roughly 80 to 90% of their pressure onto the lead foot by the moment of impact, not at the top of the backswing, at impact. That's a massive and rapid transfer happening in a fraction of a second, and it's what allows the hips to clear ahead of the arms and the club, creating what's called the kinematic sequence, the proper order of hips, then torso, then arms, then club, unwinding like a whip. Amateurs who hang back often show closer to 50 to 60% pressure on the lead foot at impact, meaning they're still sitting back on their trail leg, trying to lift the ball into the air. The mechanism for why this kills distance is straightforward. When your weight stays back, your swing center stays back too, and that shifts your low point, the bottom of your swing arc, behind the ball instead of in front of it or level with it for a driver. That produces exactly the kind of high spin, low compression strike that robs you of ball speed. Ball speed is what creates distance, not club head speed alone, a relationship measured by smash factor, the ratio between ball speed and club head speed that every launch monitor displays. A driver strike with proper weight transfer commonly produces a smash factor near 1.48 to 1.50. Hang back on your trail foot and mishit it low on the face, and that number can drop to 1.35 or lower, which on a 95-mile-per-hour swing costs you close to 20 yards of distance from ball speed loss alone, separate from any launch angle problem. Here's a drill that fixes this fast, and I've used it with players from 20 handicaps down to scratch golfers. Take your normal driver setup, then physically pick your trail foot up off the ground just slightly, an inch or two, right as you start your downswing, and let it come back down naturally for balance. This forces your body to feel what a full pressure shift onto the lead leg feels like, because you physically can't hang back if your trail foot isn't planted to hang back on. I did this with a 22 handicap player at a driving range outside Charlotte, a guy who had been fighting a weak push slice for years. 3 buckets of balls using that drill, and his average carry went from 208 to 231 yards. Roughly the distance you would cover walking from one end of a football field to past the far end zone, gained purely from where his pressure was at contact. Nothing else changed in his swing path or grip. The common mistake here is trying to force weight shift with your upper body, swaying your shoulders and head laterally toward the target instead of shifting pressure through your feet and hips. That sway makes contact worse because it moves your entire swing center off the ball. Weight shift has to start from the ground up, feet and hips first. And that leads directly into the step that almost never gets mentioned anywhere, because most golfers assume once weight shift is right, everything above the waist is fine. And that assumption is exactly where the next big mistake hides. This is the step nobody explains correctly, and it's the difference between a launched drive and what turns into a smothered iron shot with a driver in your hands. Your head position at impact controls your spine angle, and your spine angle controls attack angle more directly than almost anything else in the golf swing. The rule is simple to state. At impact, your head should still be behind the ball, and your spine should be tilted slightly away from the target, trail shoulder lower than lead shoulder. That's the posture that allows an upward strike on the ball with a driver, which is what you want. Because a driver sitting on a tee is the one club in the bag where hitting up on the ball, not down, produces the best result. Here's the number that explains why this matters more than people think. Long drive competitors, tracked at World Long Drive Championship events using TrackMan units on site, commonly generate attack angles between +3 and +6 degrees, meaning the club is moving upward through impact by that many degrees. The average amateur, by contrast, is often measured at a slightly negative attack angle, hitting down on the driver like it's an iron, based on TrackMan's own public data pulled from thousands of amateur sessions at fitting centers across the country. That swing from negative to positive attack angle, even a shift of 4 or 5 degrees, can add 15 to 20 yards of carry at the same club head speed, because an upward strike reduces spin loft and increases launch efficiency, letting the ball fly on a more penetrating, more efficient trajectory instead of ballooning up with excess backspin. The mechanism connects directly to head position, because if your head drifts forward, ahead of the ball, before impact, your entire swing arc moves forward with it, and your low point moves ahead of the ball too, guaranteeing a descending strike. This is incredibly common under pressure, because the instinct to look up early and see where the ball is going pulls the head and the upper body toward the target a half second too soon. I watched this happen with a player at a course in Scottsdale, mid-handicapper, gorgeous practice swing, but every real tee shot he'd peak early, his head drifting a good 2 inches toward the target before contact. And he was hitting a low, punchy driver shot that never got airborne, capped around 180 yards of carry. We worked on a simple checkpoint, keeping his right ear, for a right-handed golfer, pointed at the ball a beat longer than felt natural, almost uncomfortably long through impact. Within one session, his carry moved up to 205, and the ball flight went from a low-line drive to an actual launched shot with a visible arc. A second example worth naming, because this shows up even at higher levels. Studies using 3D motion capture on tour player swings, the kind of data collected by biomechanics labs, like the one at the Titleist Performance Institute, show that tour players' heads move backwards slightly, an inch or two, during the downswing before impact banking additional spine tilt right when it's needed most. Amateurs, under the pressure of a tee shot with people watching, tend to do the reverse. Their head creeps forward trying to help the ball up, which is the least effective thing you can do because it steepens the swing instead of shallowing it. The fix isn't complicated. Feel like your head is the last thing to move toward the target, well after the ball is already gone. That single cue, more than any swing thought about arms or hips, cleaned up more bad drives for the players I've worked with than any other single instruction. But even with your head staying back and your weight moving forward correctly, all of this falls apart in about 2 seconds if you skip the step that ties it all together before you ever start the club moving. Look, I'll be straight with you. If you're tired of shooting the same score every single weekend, this next part matters. The Golfer's Bible, 101 course-tested fixes to stop playing the same bad round. Every weekend lays out all 101 fixes in a clean, no-fluff edition built for real rounds, not theory. Grab it now, and you'll also get the second book, the Score Drop Roadmap, free. Scores don't drop on their own, and every weekend you wait is another card full of the same mistakes. Link in the description, QR code on screen. Fix your game once, and finally play like you train. Here's the step that takes everything you just learned and turns it into something you can do on the golf course, under pressure, without thinking about 4 separate swing thoughts at once. Because trying to consciously manage tee height, grip pressure, weight shift, and head position all at the same time during a live swing is exactly how amateurs freeze up and hit their worst shot of the day. The fix is a pre-shot routine that checks all 4 before you ever pull the club back, and it takes about 5 seconds. Research on pre-shot routines, including work published in the Journal of Sports Sciences studying elite versus amateur golfers, found that consistent pre-shot routines, ones with the same sequence and roughly the same timing every single time, correlated with lower scoring variance and more consistent strike quality, reducing the number of true disasters. The shots that go 40 yards offline, even when overall swing mechanics stayed the same. Consistency in the setup routine trains your nervous system to expect the same sequence of events, which lowers the kind of last-second tension spike that ruins grip pressure and head position exactly when you need them, steady. Here's the actual 5-second sequence I want you to build into every drive from now on. Step 1. As you tee the ball, set the club down first and tee to the crown, half a ball above, the thing we covered first. This takes 1 second and removes the guesswork entirely. Step 2. Take your grip and immediately do the 2-finger waggle, feeling the club head swing loosely, resetting your pressure down to that 3 or 4 out of 10 we talked about. This takes about 1.5 seconds. Step 3. Take 1 committed look at your target, then 1 look back at the ball, and as you do, feel your weight settle slightly into your lead foot, maybe 55 to 60%. As a starting point before the swing even begins, this primes the pressure shift instead of leaving it to chance mid-swing. Step 4. Pick a spot about 2 inches in front of the ball on the target line and commit to keeping your right ear, for a right-handed player, behind that spot until you feel the ball is already gone. That's the entire routine, and it directly encodes all 4 physical keys into one repeatable motion, instead of 4 separate thoughts competing for your attention at the worst possible moment. I tested a version of this with a group of mid-handicap players at a golf school outside Orlando over a 3-day period, players ranging from 12 to 20 handicap. On day 1, Without any routine changes, their average driver dispersion, meaning how far left or right their misses landed, was around 32 yards off center line. By day 3, after drilling this exact 5-second sequence until it became automatic, average dispersion tightened to around 19 yards, roughly the width of a 2-lane road, and average carry distance across the group increased by 11 yards. Nothing about their actual swing mechanics changed in that window. What changed was that the setup stopped fighting the swing. The common mistake is trying to rush this routine on the course because of slow play pressure or self-consciousness about taking too long over the ball. 5 seconds is not slow play. Most PGA Tour pace of play studies put an acceptable shot routine well within that window, and the players who skip it to save 2 seconds are the ones who end up searching for their ball in the trees for 2 extra minutes anyway. Build the sequence on the range first. Exactly the same every single time, until your hands do it without your brain narrating each step, and then take it to the course exactly as is. None of these 5 things were ever about swinging harder, and that's the part most golfers never let themselves believe, because the industry has spent decades selling the idea that distance comes from a new shaft or a faster tempo or 6 months in the gym. It comes from where the ball sits on the tee, how tight your hands are, where your pressure moves, where your head stays, and whether you do all of it the same way every single time you stand over the ball. Fix those 5 things, and you're not hoping for a good drive anymore. You're building one, on command, from a setup that took less time to run through than it took you to read this sentence. The next question worth asking yourself isn't which tip to try first. It's why you were ever taught that a great drive was about strength in the first place.